Si quiere vendérselo a él, hágale. Yo no tengo un cliente para eso. Si quiere, pues yo, sí, yo tengo un cliente para eso. Porque así me da la comisión, lo que le salga.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay, but look.
Is that okay?
No, just, is there a way to apart because here it's cut.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We need something that protects that.
Está diciendo señor que se puede. Ya.
Yeah, by the way, I would like you to join this
Sí, total.
Sí, ya estoy. Sorry, no, that's just
Very good.
Good handwriting. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, dear participants. I'm delighted to invite you all to our side event on sustainable blue finance for ocean positive action. This is an important step for the public development finance institutions in their focus on the sustainable blue economy, and I'm delighted to invite our keynote speaker, former Minister of the Environment and Conservation International Fellow Carlos Correa, to the podium to introduce this event. Thank you so much.
Bueno, muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone.
Friends here too. Welcome to Colombia. Welcome to Cartagena. Good morning to everyone, all the visitors. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to attend this session of the Public Development Bank's call to deliver positive action for the ocean. I'd like to express my gratitude to my fellow speakers, all of you, who I look forward to collaborating with on this critical topic. Thank you to all the sponsors for this event, this great event, all the PDBs, the MDBs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Romain, for the invitation to AFD. At Conservation International, we believe that an all-hand-on-deck strategy will be needed to bridge the 700 billion gap in biodiversity finance. We must build a nature-positive world and rapidly scale up climate finance flows to meet the 2030 global climate goals. Estimated shows that the blue economy, which refers to the range of economic uses of ocean and coastal resources, is estimated to be worth more than $2.5 trillion per year globally. We know that massive investments will be needed to protect biodiversity hotspots and transitions to more sustainable practices in energy, shipping, fisheries, aquaculture, mining, and tourism. The challenges to transition to a healthy and sustainable blue economy are daunting. 1/3 of the world's wild fisheries are overexploited or depleted. And over the past 40 years, populations of marine species have been slashed in half. The vast majority of the world's remaining coral reef population are threatened by climate change and human activities. Only 24 billion is spent each year. 24 billion is spent each year protecting on protecting existing areas, far short of what is needed to meet the global biodiversity framework, the 30 by 30 target. Colombia did it 8 years before. The 30 by 30. So the 30 before 30. which calls for 30% of the world's terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine areas to be effective protection and management by 2030. The 23 trillion in assets from public development banks will be key in scaling up biodiversity finance efforts, and in particular, blue economy investments. Public development banks can drive investment in both the public and the private sectors, including blended finance. Blended finance schemes with leverage public or philanthropic sources of funds to catalyze private investment. The Finance in Common Summit's 2022 progress report shows 1 in 2 public development banks integrate climate in their activities, but biodiversity is the last public policy objective taken into account. It's incredible. It's the last one in the objectives. This must change. Nature consideration must be mainstream across the operations and policies of these banks to scale up investments in the blue economy. At Conservation International, we have taken a leading role in several multilaterals and multi-stakeholder initiatives tied to the blue economy. Our Center for Ocean is active in over 50 countries who have helped protect and improve more than 1.1 million square kilometers of new and improved marine protection since 2019. We know that mangroves are the key biodiversity hotspots that provide flood protection for millions of people and are critical for carbon sequestration. However, as a recent Paulson Institute report shows, an estimated of 27 to 34 billion is needed per year to restore degraded coastal ecosystems that provide multiple vital benefits for coastal communities. Our organization works with coastal communities around the world to protect mangroves, including our Vida Manglar project in Cispatá Bay of Colombian Caribbean coast. We are working with the Ministry of Environment and other regional partners to prevent emission of nearly 1 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere over the next 30 years. The mangrove forest became the first to enter the carbon market with its carbon store, fully calculated and verified as blue carbon credits. We are also signatory and advocate for the Mangrove Breakthrough. That is an initiative that seeks to unlock $4 billion by 2030 and secure the future of 50 million hectares of mangrove forest by 2030. But at the same time, to double protection. Today, we have 41% of the mangrove ecosystems in protected areas. And the goal is to have 80% by 2030. And also we have lost 1.1 million hectares of mangroves in the last 20 years. So our goal at the Mangrove Breakthrough is to restore half of what we have lost. We need to do it together. So the call is to action and invite you to be part of the Mangrove Breakthrough. I would also like to mention Conservation International Green and Gray Infrastructure Program. Green Gray Infrastructure combines the conservation and restoration of nature, including natural coastal buffers, such as mangroves and seagrasses, with conventional approaches. These innovative approaches are key to protecting blue carbon ecosystems and reduce associated with impacts such as flooding. More examples like these are needed. We need more. We need more actions. We need more best practices. And let's move forward with the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and address sustainable development. Goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. To do this, we need to build a broad coalition that includes public and development banks as key mobilizers. The formidable challenges we face as a society also present opportunities to bridge the climate finance and biodiversity funding gaps and catalyze public and private and philanthropic investments. Let's use our public development banks to advance the public good to build a nature positive world. Hit our 30 by 30 target and meet the goals we agreed upon at COP15 last December. You know, I think the final reflection is this is about nature and people. Esto es acerca del hombre y la naturaleza. Not everything is about money. It's about humanity. You saw what happened yesterday in Madrid, what's happening in Australia, wildfires, floods. So we need to take care of the planet, and we need public banks. We need PDBs, we need NDBs to do this. So thank you very much, and welcome to Colombia, the second most biodiversity country in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this heartfelt appeal. We now move to the two institutions that have been really driving this call for action. And so we will first ask Vice President Ricardo Burinho of the European Investment Bank. What has been driving the EIB to develop its strategic approach towards the blue sustainable economy?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much to all of you for coming here to attend the session early in the morning. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and as I stand here before you, it's impossible to overlook the vast expanse of blue that covers our planet. So hers is painted in vivid blue, and that is something that is not merely picturesque. It's a testament to the oceans, to our planet, most critical assets, but also one of the most overlooked marvels that we have. Delve deeper into the realm of oceans and you'll find a complex ecosystem teeming with life. These waters are responsible for a staggering amount of life and play an instrumental role in the very climate system that sustains life on Earth. They don't just provide oxygen, they act as colossal carbon sponges. They have been absorbing about 1/4 of all CO2 emissions and an astounding 90% of the excess of heat generated by our activities and by greenhouse gases. So oceans, strange as it may sound, are the lungs of the planet and the natural thermostat. Throughout the history, oceans have been reservoirs of opportunities. Today, over 90% of the global trade relies on sea routes. And OECD has projected that by 2030, the ocean economy could contribute as much as $3 trillion to global volume. So $3 trillion, it's a huge, immense amount of value that we need to preserve. Nearly 3 billion people around the globe depend on the marine and coastal biodiversity for their income, for their means of living. And for many, the ocean is not just a resource. It's a lifeline, in fact. And coastal and marine tourism, fisheries, aquaculture are not just industries, they are the beacon of hope for millions, providing food, providing income, and a path out of poverty. The relationship that we have between ocean and economic prosperity is a symbiotic relation. As we extract wealth from the oceans, we bear the responsibility to reinvest and to keep his health and the sustainability of the human activity with the oceans. With all its might and with all generosity, our ocean is under serious threat. First, there is climate change, rising temperatures, ocean water acidification are not just terrestrial concerns. They are silently causing sea levels to rise at an unprecedented rate. And a mere increase of 1.5 centigrade degrees threatens the very existence of 70 to 9% of the coral reefs. 70 to 9%. These are not just underwater decorations. They are, in fact, these coral reefs bustling cities of marine life. And add to this the menace of pollution. The very plastics we discard carelessly every day find their way, one way or the other, into the waters of the water of the ocean. Over 9.5 million tons of plastic, so a grim testament of human neglect, end up stifling marine life every year. But this neglect is not for free. This strikes back. I'm not sure you are aware that about 5 grams of plastic enter our bodies every week through our mouths, through the fish, through the seafood we eat. That's what you're intaking. 1 plastic credit card per week comes into our bodies. And then there is the overexploitation of fish stocks, threatening the delicate balance of marine biodiversity. Institutions like the EIB are striving to lead a new era of sustainability, and our dedication extends from the implementation of wastewater management to spearheading initiatives for green shipping and championing marine energy and renewable energy. EIB has been tirelessly working not just in championing a sustainable blue economy, but in crafting the very blueprint of what it means. Since its inception, the bank has understood the intrinsic value of the ocean and has channeled investments to ensure ocean protection and the sustainable use. In 2017, we marked a key stride forward with the EIB alongside with the European Commission and the Worldwide Fund for Nature and the World Resource Institute co-founded the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles. This is a vision that recognizes the inextricable link between the health of the ocean and our prosperity of our global community. So a pivotal step-by-step, and the EIB and the global partners are doing is the Clean Ocean Initiative, targeting marine pollution, primarily plastics, aim at preventing pollution to go into the ocean. This is a great collaboration with the IFD, with KfW, with GDP, with ECO and the BRD, and the Clean Ocean Initiative pledge up to 4 billion euros of projects by 2025. So let me conclude by telling you that no entity, public or private, can turn the tide alone, and there's an imperative for global public development banks to rally together and to support public authorities in mobilizing the private sector. Only through our collective efforts we can make the difference, as proven by the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles. And today we amplify this spirit of collaboration through our call for action on sustainable finance, sustainable blue finance. This is the first public statement of public development plans of blue economy and on delivering positive action for the ocean. It can't be just a mere declaration. It needs to trigger and design a strategy to work together and to act. And the time is now. We need to act now. We are already late, but nothing better than start acting now. Not just a declaration, but having a proper action. And this is great and the moment to call for action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this leads nicely to AFD, Laurent Bitescombe. AFD was pushing for this call for action. What was the thinking behind the approach?
Yeah, thank you, Torsten, and thank you all for coming here this morning. Actually, we've been working for a long time now on trying to draft this call for action with the help of our friends from EIB and all the signatories that are around us today, and thank you for them all. There's actually 3 main reasons why we are pushing for this. The first one is that I think Carlos and Ricardo gave us some very persuasive argument, very precise figures about why we have to act. And for us as PDBs, public development banks, of course it's a sector that we can't overlook for nature reason, people reason, and economic reason. So that's the first reason. Second reason is that there is a strong French engagement for the support to oceans. President Macron did a summit last year in Western France about the ocean, and there's a great commitment from our country on this issue, and we will be hosting in 2025 in Nice on the Mediterranean Sea the third UN Ocean Summit with our friends from Costa Rica. The third reason is that at AFD, we have a strong and long track record in terms of ocean activity. It's about 750 million euros each year of investments, and more than half of them having positive co-benefits for biodiversity. And we are very, it's a very important issue for us to be positive. That's in the title of the call for action, call to deliver positive action for the ocean. And when we talk about this kind of operation, it means supporting eco-ports in Indonesia, funding mangrove in Senegal, working on coastal ecosystem in Togo, and so on. So lots of projects, and of course we want to do more and better, and for that we know the importance of working together as a system and not alone each of us. So that's the three main reasons. If you allow me, Torsten, maybe I'd like to just share with you the expectations that we have at AFD for the roadmap that we are collectively going to draft from now on until 2025 for this very important issue. And there's actually 4 key points that I would like to share with you, and considerations that we have. The first one is that we strongly need to include better protection and restoration of marine ecosystems. We do need to go beyond the traditional approach of environmental and social safeguards, and we need to look for real and measurable co-benefits for marine ecosystems. That means really net gains for nature. And this is the sense of this positive action call for action, and it puts us in direct follow of the Global Biodiversity Framework and the 30 by 30 commitment that we took at the end of last year. Second point is that we need to increase our expertise and our knowledge in terms of sectors, and we have to work more on science-based evidence, meaning knowing more. I mean, the figures that Ricardo gave us about the amount of plastic that we are eating, or I don't know, what word we could use, is really very tremendous. And I mean, we need to know more about plastic, high sea protection, eco-ports, and so on. So work with science. Third point is blue carbon. We have to experiment new tools we're all talking about. There are very interesting other side events on this subject, blue credits, blue bonds, debt for nature swap, and so on. And scaling up blue finance also means engaging more with the private sector. So that's definitely something we need to work on. And the last point is transparency and accountability. It's important to say what we are doing, each and every one of us, but also all together as a system, not only in relation to the ocean, but also for the oceans, and to be able to give insight, impacts, and measures on our contribution to SDG 14. So that's it. I hope I've not been too long. Thanks again to the FIX community for making this possible, and let's get to work then. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And for all of you in the audience, I'm delighted to announce that this call for action is now live. You can find it on the website, and congratulations to all the organizations who participated in it. Cynthia Bazuna, you represent the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, and what is your response to what you've heard now? How do you see this coalition evolving?
Of course. Hola, buenos días, good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Just by having this room full of people means that we're on the right track. So thank you for being here. My reaction will be to this, that this is amazing news. This is exactly the call for action that we need to create the blue economy that we need. There is no ocean wealth without ocean health. So I would start by saying that 90% of the excess heat is being absorbed by the ocean right now, by human activity. So yes, it represents a challenge, but it also represents an opportunity. So the ocean could be a strong ally towards climate change. That's for starters. 50% of the oxygen that we're breathing is produced by the ocean, and 25% of all carbon dioxide emissions as well. So let me tell you a bit about the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. Back in 2018, a group of world leaders decided to work together. And they commissioned a lot of experts around the world and scientists to understand what was going on with the ocean and what can we do. What can we do to tackle climate change, but also biodiversity loss. So these 17 leaders commissioned what is called the Transformations Agenda, and it's online, and you can access this information and all of the blue papers. I invite you to do so because it is not only for scientists. Everyone can understand what it says. And on the core of this Transformations Agenda, a commitment was launched, and these 17 countries committed to, at the core of this Transformations Agenda, it came very clear that the path was to have sustainable ocean plans. This means every water under national jurisdiction should go through a process that will allow them to manage 100% approach. What do I mean by 100% approach? Is the management of 100% of the ocean. By doing so, we will be better equipped to tackle climate change, to address biodiversity loss, but also to create prosperity. So this agenda is based on 3 pillars: prosperity, production, and preservation as well. Carlos mentioned the 30 by 30 target. So there cannot be 30% without 70% as well. We need to address the whole area under national jurisdiction, even to have a conversation afterwards about BBNJ and how can that look like. This panel of leaders decided in 2020 to create a coalition, a voluntary coalition of leading institutions that can aim the countries to establish, to develop and implement sustainable ocean plans. I'm very happy to say that today some of the members are here with me and have been strong supporters, and I invite you all to become members of this coalition, because this is where the change starts. For these 17 countries, 14 of them, the founding members, committed to have sustainable ocean plans by 2025, which is just around the corner. It's very tangible, it's very doable, and it addresses the main issues that Ricardo was referring to, as well as Carlos. Because this is about the livelihoods, this is about renewable energy, this is about sustainable tourism, but it's also about food security. And those microplastics that are now part of our body are mainly because we haven't addressed marine pollution. So this holistic approach really resonates to not only tackling climate change, helping biodiversity loss stop and reverse, but also it helps build a sustainable ocean economy around the coastal areas. I'm from Costa Rica. Some of my fellows here are from Latin America, and as Latin Americans, we know that the coastal areas are always the poorest. Also, I want to mention that SDG 14 is the least financed of them all. So we need to change that as well. I'm a lawyer, so bear with me. I don't know this by heart, but the numbers are $175 billion per year needed to achieve the goal by 2030. And yet, between 2015 and 2019, just below $10 billion was actually invested, according to WEF. So this is how far behind we are. It's a challenge, but it's also an invitation for all of you to reflect on what can be done. I'm done, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Now I turn over to CAF. I'm very pleased to have here Alicia Montalvo, who is Manager of Climate Action and Positive Biodiversity. And CAF has the ambition to be leading Latin American Green Bank. How do you see the blue and the green? How does it all come together for you?
Thank you very much. I feel very proud of being part of this Call for Action initiative. And answering to your question, we have committed to become the Green Bank of Latin American region and the Caribbean region. We want to devote up to $25 billion before 2026 for green activities. And as part of this, we have made a commitment, 1.25 billion devoted to blue economy. And so I would say that there is no green without blue and blue without green. Even more, if becoming green bank is difficult, because it's difficult, sometimes we need to change very much the way we work, the conversation, the capacity building we are supporting in the countries. It's even more difficult to become blue, because up to the moment, there is no very clear definition of what blue economy means, sustainable blue economy means. We are working on that. But I think that this is very important in order to really identify the activities and to create the momentum for the countries to really devote resources, as my colleagues were mentioning, to this. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to really support the health and the wealth of the ocean, but not only of the ocean, but of the people depending on the ocean, which I think is very important. In the Caribbean, 80% of the people depend on the ocean, the wealth of these people and the health of the people. And in Latin America, up to 50% of the people depend on the ocean. So we are talking about the ocean, but we are talking about the people. So this is difficult, and I think that PDBs, we need to change the way we work in this field. It's difficult because there are no categorizations. Our instruments sometimes are not very well adapted to these kind of activities. We are talking about blue carbon, sustainable fisheries, coastal protection. Everything has to be defined as a blue activity, but at the same time, there are activities that are categorized in other fields. So sometimes it's quite difficult to really be clear. What are we planning to do with countries? In our conversation with the countries, we need to be very specific and to be clear of what are the benefits of investing in that. So what is CAF doing now? We are focusing our activity in five fields. We have developed a strategy that we presented in Panama conference in March. At that moment, we decided to be part of the coalition. Cynthia, thank you very much for approaching us, and we are supporting the programs for the countries, the Sustainability Ocean programs. So this is very important for us. First, we are working in capacity building with the countries. We think it's important to really make them to understand what kind of activities could be part of that, and to make them understand that these are investments. This is important for their economies and for the people living there. Second, we are focusing on regional approaches, because we are a regional bank. We consider that the ocean needs to be approached from a regional point of view. So we are working in the Caribbean. We have a project now with the GEF, for supporting the blue economy in the Caribbean countries, and we are supporting the CEMAR project, the East Pacific Corridor, supporting the technical secretariat. We consider that it's important to reinforce the governance in order to really make possible that countries work together to protect the ocean, because it's very difficult to define the frontiers. Third, we are creating alliances. We think it's important that we work together in the Ocean Coalition and with the Call for Action, of course. So I think we all need to work in alliances, and we need to identify low-hanging fruits. We are now in this moment, we are working with the Sargasso problem in the Caribbean. We are also working in protecting and regenerating coral reefs. We are fighting the illegal fisheries. So we are identifying very specific activities that really make clear what is the relevance of protecting the ocean. And we are working with the green funds. We, in fact, have been have been appointed as a leader agency for the project of health, ocean health, in the integrated program of the GEF. We feel very proud, and we are working on that to identify specific projects. So I have to say, we are learning in blue economy because it's something that only was introduced in the conversations of the United Nations Convention in 2019, only 4 years ago. The ocean was not in the conversation before. So I think that we all need to really learn how to work on that, how to protect the ocean and what to do. And so we are there and happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I now move to Adonai Herrera Martinez. You're director of the Environment and Sustainability Department at the EBRD. The EBRD has a lot of operational expertise in this space. How do you see this going forward?
Thank you, Torsten. Thank you, Roman, for the invitation and the colleagues. I'm really glad to be here, especially to share panel with Ricardo Mourinho, who's been a driving force in one of our partnerships that I will refer to, the Blue Mediterranean Partnership. I'm actually glad to speak after Alicia because we have indeed more experience that met the eye. But I'd like to summarize the three key takeaways of my intervention, because in these conferences we tend to be overwhelmed. There's a waterfall of ideas, and sometimes we lose the main points. So the first point I want to make is on the experience, on the past, and it's a message of optimism. We have more experience than we thought originally. The second is the need, the present, the need to do more that we've done until now. And the third message is of the future. The GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework, sets an ideal framework for us to conserve, to protect, to recover, and to sustainably manage marine ecosystems. But before I start explaining what we've done on blue economy, I'd like to introduce EBRD. We are often confused with our larger sister institution of the EIB. So we are slightly smaller. We invest about 15 billion dollars per year in a region that covers from Morocco to Mongolia, former Soviet Union originally, but then we've expanded to all that region. We are focused on the private sector and on projects. So we're a bit of a bottom-up institution. So you'll hear me talking about a specific project like wastewater treatment, circular economy, etc. So when we brought this theme of blue economy to our bankers, we were received by rolling eyes, right? Basically, our bankers looked at us and said, "Here they come again, the tree huggers. We don't do this. We are a private sector bank. We don't do blue economy." But we were fortunate enough to be managing a fund, the Northern Dimension Environmental Partnership, that for 20 years has been investing in wastewater treatment around the Baltic Sea, specifically around the Gulf of Finland. So basically, that fund has deployed 200 million euros in grants to mobilize over 1.3 billion euros in wastewater treatment. And that, we were also fortunate enough that the Baltic states created the Helsinki Convention to monitor the status of the Baltic Sea. And that Helsinki Convention, HELCOM, has managed to identify the main drivers of the recovery of the Baltic ecosystem. And those wastewater treatment plants that we finance have contributed to that recovery, with biodiversity outcomes being the recovery of fish stocks, the return of white-tailed eagles, and the return of apex predators like seals, Baltic seals. And you probably have heard, some of you have heard me talking about this, because this is the paradigmatic example of a blue economy activity that we've hosted, right? But this, in a way, is anecdotal, and I move to the second point, the need to do more. This is just not enough to avert the marine biodiversity crisis we're living today. And that's precisely why we decided to translate this experience in the Baltic into a much more complex marine ecosystems like the Mediterranean, and why we teamed up with EIB, with Ricardo, with the Union for the Mediterranean, with our AFD colleagues, with the French Development Agency, KfW, to actually create this Blue Med partnership. Translated the scope to another region and expanded the theme into more blue economy sectors, from wastewater treatment to circular economy to sustainable tourism and sustainable aquaculture. And the idea is actually now to pledge money for that and promote both investments in those sectors, but also policy reform. So use these projects as pilot projects to catalyze political transformation, policy reform, right? And this is where we are. Creating this Blue Med partnership that we expect to have a pledging conference at the COP28. Yeah, I get thumbs up from Roma, 1 minute. We are trying, and I will conclude with the final point, the future. The reason why we've actually requested support from the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility for this Blue Mediterranean Partnership is not so much that we need the money, which we do, but it's relatively small amount of money. We want those global funding partners to participate in this activity in order to learn lessons and be able to quickly translate that experience into ecosystems like the Caribbean, like the South Pacific, like any other marine ecosystems that require the same type of action as we've done in the Baltic and we plan to do in the Mediterranean. Because, and this is the final conclusion, because the recovery of marine ecosystems and the loss of marine biodiversity is a global problem that requires, as opposed to climate, requires a specific local action. And that's what we want to achieve with this type of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to a voice from civil society. We have Luis Miguel here in the audience. Luis Miguel, you are from a Colombian civil society coalition. What is your feedback to what you've just heard?
Ok, bueno, muchas gracias por la participación.
Well, thank you very much for the participation and all the people who attended. I'd like to start by talking about the issue of participation and the voice of civil society in the decision-making processes, especially that in which we are interested, the oceans. The participation of civilian society is not only a matter of a discussion, but it should be understood as the way in how we can reduce risks for these projects of investment and projects of development that we want to do at local and national and international level. It is very important to include different spaces of discussion amongst the civilian society in different aspects, in decision-making processes and co-responsibilities that we have in the investment projects. We have to understand different context in those decision-making processes. It's not the same thing to talk about micro or ecological connections, amongst the different sectors or sections at ocean level, at land, ground level, mountains and snow mountains. It's very important to differentiate those contexts because those are not the same decisions and they have different affected in a different way in what happens in this investment project. So it's important also to know that it is a double relationship, a double way, double path. What we want to analyze amongst these investment projects, that indeed these consequences in the oceans or the implications in the investment projects of oceans equally affect the communities that are committed in the countries. And it is also the relationship, and it's also very important, the concern that we have in terms of plastics. The World Plastic Program of the United Nations says that 85% of the residues that go to the ocean are indeed plastic. And as Ricardo said, those microplastics that not only that we intake the human society, it's also done by the maritime ecosystems. These microplastics also affect a lot the oxygen production, as Cynthia was saying, 50%, or we're saying 50% of the oxygen produced worldwide is originated in the ocean, and how they affect the microplastics in these ocean ecosystems affect the oxygen production worldwide. The question is, and Cynthia highlighted it before, it is a subject that is new to explore, a subject that is now just a couple of years I've been talking about the oceans. So the question is, who are we going to discuss with what civilian society in the ocean territories are we going to carry out the discussion? Because it's not the same way the civil societies that are living in the cities and talking in different spaces, but in the ocean zones, what civil society, who are we going to work with? Who are we going to sit with? Because many times we see that the fishing communities and the coast communities are more interested in economic subjects at internal level of the countries and not in ecosystems, maritime ecosystems. Likewise, the responsibilities, we have to scale up those responsibilities of the investment projects, not only to investors, but also including the states, and the decisions made in the states and countries have to be equally in a consensus with the civilian society in the territories, who are the first ones affected when these investment projects are stated, mentioned, implemented, and also when they implement the projects or they start. There are tools that now the civilian society may have very close. The agreements, the principles established in the Paris Agreement, in the Escazú Agreement, in the Arjou Agreement also help that these decision-making processes to be efficient in terms of reducing the risks that these investment projects have. There is a double responsibility in the investment projects that has to be taken into account, and that we in the civilian society are thinking in double materiality. Not only the investments run a risk, but the investment projects not only run the risk for the origin of the funds, but also include risks for the communities, risks for the territories and places where these projects are carried out, development projects. And finally, I'd like to tell you that everything that has been mentioned here in terms of investment and resources to approach climate changes or research or economic development in the oceans and in the ocean regions should have a funding, a non-reimbursable funding. It is not a fair investment to have resources and to change them by debts, but because it increases the lack of equity in the communities and territories. We have to think in another way, and I feel that as it is something new, the one we are dealing with the oceans, well, it's important to analyze these new ways of investment, new ways of participation, and new ways of development.
And actually, this is my opportunity to thank all of the speakers, and I have some follow-up questions for each one of you. But before I do, any direct feedback to what you just heard from a civil society perspective? Cynthia?
Gracias, Luis Miguel.
Well, thank you, Luis Miguel, for those words.
Because it really resonates to the work that we have been doing. This has to be built up from the bottom up. Without a real consultation process, without including landlocked countries, for example, you mentioned from the vision from source to sea, and how that affects, for example, marine pollution. So exactly to your point, that's why we need to focus. The stakeholders of the ocean are all of us. It doesn't even matter whether you're part of a coastal community or not, because the ocean provides so many things, even though if you're not part of a coastal community. But of course, participation process should be inclusive. Equity should be part, and ocean finance should be addressed in a way that includes all of this participation. I invite you to visit the Ocean Panel's webpage and at the Ocean Action 2030 Coalition, because a lot of scientists worked very hard on developing a sustainable ocean plan guide that resonates with everything that you have been saying about having an inclusive process and how to build from the bottom up what is needed to address the participation, especially from indigenous peoples, from local communities. But not only that, it's not only about involving them in the process, it's also about knowledge sharing, it's also about learning from these communities that are the ones that really know if there's a sea level rise. They know more about sedimentation, and they know more about acidification than any other, because they live by these ecosystems and their livelihoods depend on them. So thank you for bringing that insightful vision that we share, and that is part of what these two banks to my right have been working on, and what we need more public development banks to focus on as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And Laurent, you're raising your hand, and this gives me also a chance to ask you more broadly about the ambitious approach, the joint approach you're talking about. So maybe you can explain that in the form of an example.
Thank you. Just to reflect on your intervention, which was really interesting. I hope I understood everything correctly. My Spanish level is not that great. But I think it's echoed one of my points that I was trying to make, to go beyond only managing our projects with the approach of environmental and social safeguards. It echoes the issues of double materiality you mentioned. It's not only what's the impact of the project on the community, but what the community brings in order to build the project. So sort of the bottom-up approach that also Adonai was mentioning. And it's really essential that projects are being constructed with in an inclusive approach, bottom-up. Second thing is that, and it also answers your question, is maybe that our focus and the key issue is to work on operations with a sort of a triple positive impact. Positive impact for the economy, social, and for the planet. And that's if we manage to reach this triple benefit impact without, of course, harming the other SDGs that we're talking about. That would be really the key to unlock and to answer the issues of ocean preservation we're talking about. And in terms of what constitutes good projects, what's the kind of things that we'd like to push, it's of course all the blue carbon projects, and especially, so meaning all projects that we have in terms of coastal ecosystems, mangroves, seagrass, etc. We already have a track record on this kind of project, but it's really something we need to go much deeper. They are very complicated issues. It was well said by Adonai in terms of difficulties of the working of each ecosystem, which is very different from the Baltic Sea, Mediterranean, the Caribbean, and so on. Hence the necessity to work on science, science-based operations, and also knowledge of the people living in these coastal areas.
Thank you very much. And I think that leads me to you, Alicia, because we're talking partnerships and common approaches. So I wanted to see what you think from a regional perspective, what your European partners here could bring to the table operationally. How do you see that could work on this particular issue?
Well, I think that the experience that Europe has, particularly in the Baltic, the Mediterranean, is really crucial for a learning process in Latin America and the Caribbean. But still, I think that, as you have been mentioning, it's important to learn about the communities living in Latin America and the Caribbean. I think that sometimes we try to translate experiences from one region to other without really taking into account the specificities of these, the communities living there. So sometimes even mistakes could be made if we try to bring these experiences without any specific adaptation. I think it's important, the collaboration, of course, of all the institutions, because we are talking only of one ocean. It's important that there are no oceans, but one ocean. But at the same time, I think that the process needs to be different. As I was mentioning, I think that PDBs, we need to learn a lot about blue economy. We need to think in a different manner. And I think that this is something that we really need to do together. How to adapt our instruments, how to adapt the way we work with the communities, because the challenge is huge and the instruments are not very well adapted to these challenges. This is our feeling, and I think that in the case of the Latin American and Caribbean Bank, we really need to work specifically in the Caribbean region, which is very specific. I am looking at the manager for the Caribbean region, which is there, Stacy Richards Kennedy. And we have so many different ecosystems if you consider the Arctic, the Chilean, Argentina. So it's very difficult to really consider all the different spaces and ecosystems. So we need to learn a lot about the European experiences. We need to adapt that. And what can we have from Europe? Maybe money. No, this is a joke, but it's true. Now we are talking about the collaboration European Union and the Latin America and the Caribbean region. In fact, next week there will be a meeting in Spain about that. And one of the fields of collaboration is blue economy within the green economy field. So I think this is very important because there are opportunities for investment in new sectors that need to be analyzed from a perspective of new technologies, innovation, and I think there is a huge field there where collaboration could be very useful.
Thank you very much. And actually that brings me back to Ricardo Mourinho from the European organizational perspective and what you heard about the different partnership approaches and including the private sector. How do you see this evolving?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Adonai, for the microphone partnership and for all the work we did together with EBRD, which has been quite important for both institutions. We've learned a lot and we continue to learn a lot. From the European perspective, well, let me start to say that when we speak about blue and green, I used to say that, of course, to have green you need blue, otherwise you just get yellow if you don't mix enough blue into the yellow to get green. So this to say that we must see the blue economy as a very important part, but still a part of the discussion about climate. And this goes also into the discussion and to the considerations we are having here about green bonds and blue bonds. I'm in charge of funding and treasurer of TIB, and the most important is to have a well-established brand, and we have the green bond and the sustainable bond for everything that, though being sustainable, is not strictly green, but we don't have a blue bond. And we need to be quite careful in putting lots of colors into the bond market because it creates quite some fragmentation that can backfire. So this to say that it's important to define what is blue, what are the sustainable blue economy principles, but then having blue bonds or green bonds or sustainable bonds, I think it has to do with the funding strategy of each of the institutions. And you don't necessarily need a blue bond to finance the blue economy. What it needs to be clear, what are you financing with whatever sustainable or green bonds, and that's the key. When it comes to bringing the private sector, in our sustainable blue economy program that we have at EIB, we are invested thus far 7 billion euros over the last, let's say, 5 years in the blue economy. Our estimate is that this allowed us to mobilize 24 billion of investment. So numbers in billions always look big, but if you take it in the context of all the green investment, blue is quite small inside what is the green investment. So it's more is needed, but it's not just a question, and I would say mostly it's not a question of funding or scarcity of funding. It's a question of finding projects that find the right environment to prosper and to be bankable, and that's to given the time considerations going to what Luis just mentioned to us, which I think we fully agree and we are fully in line. So stakeholders, well, we are stakeholders, of course, and all stakeholders have some private interest and that's what makes them a stakeholder. The issue is to have all the stakeholders on the table, and in my perspective, two things are key. First, you need dialogue, and dialogue is important to bring everybody together. You'll never get a consensus because any political decision involves somebody be a bit worse, somebody be a bit more happy, but at least you need to agree on what to disagree, and that's very important to create ownership. And that's the key when you look at these projects in the blue economy, that they need to be local. Local communities must have ownership. They need to understand why they need to pay in one way or the other for something to get something better. That's key. The second thing is about how do you create a market, and the market for blue economy is a market. And what you need is any market, and markets are not that different, is good institutions, regulation, and incentives. And that's precisely where I think we might not be totally in line. I don't think we can sustain an activity based on subsidies. You may subsidize at some point of the activity to move it to a new level where it can live by itself, and you stop subsidizing. I think what you need is incentives and internalization, meaning that whenever we have fisheries, fish must be priced at a level that takes into the consideration not only the cost of catching the fish in the ocean, but also the cost for the ecosystem. And that's pretty much what you have in any public good. That's where the discussion comes about green and about carbon prices. What you need is to have proper policy to incentivize whatever services or goods coming from the ocean to be priced at a market efficient level, which means that they might be slightly more expensive for some people, such that you get the right amount of capture in the case of the fishing. I think that's a key discussion that we need to have, and of course that trying to copy-paste the Mediterranean into the Caribbean can only run bad, because it always runs bad. It only by chance things run good. Replicate the same thing in different conditions and expect the same result. It only happens by chance, and better look at this 2 times before doing that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as we're coming towards the end of our official time, I still would love to give the opportunity to the floor for any questions, short remarks whilst you think about your question or remark. Adonai, do you want to just briefly comment on the scaling aspect of this? How do we grow this sustainable blue economy?
Thank you, Torsten. I had a couple of points, but it's great to have spoken right after Ricardo, because he made a fantastic point. Right now, in order to scale up, I mean, in line with the joint MDB statement on Nature, People and Planet, where we're trying to explore as MDBs, as multilateral development banks, how to scale up nature in our operations. One of the entry points that we're exploring is the opportunity to achieve biodiversity net gains, and Laurent mentioned these net gains before in his intervention. Basically, use our projects as entry points to recover nature whenever we operate around degraded land. I feel this is an ideal opportunity to actually turn our projects from nature neutral into nature positive. But this requires money to pay for those interventions, and our clients will not be wanting to invest in these elements for free. So, to the point that Ricardo was making, we need to develop the cash flows that will compensate investors for nature positive action. And that is achieved through, in my opinion, through 2 routes. By developing sustainable business models, and we finance, I don't know if you were part of that, but we finance a very interesting investment on sustainable tourism in Jordan, in the Aqaba Bay, whereby a high-end hotel actually recover the reef in front of its shoreline, and as well created an artificial marina and a nursery for corals inside the hotel. That's clearly a nature positive investment on the sustainable tourism sector, but also develop cash flows from first, the net zero pledges are an ideal opportunity for actually invest in carbon removals, so create credits out of those removals thanks to the photosynthesis of reforestation. But in the case of oceans, that's a bit more complex. So possibly biodiversity credits. The biodiversity credit market will be a source of that potential compensation, and that's why I'm delighted to be in Colombia, because Colombia is at the forefront of biodiversity markets, and I would like to learn about that experience and see how we can transpose it elsewhere, not directly, but hopefully inspired by the experience of Colombia. So just to finalize, the creation of revenue streams for nature positive action is essential to achieve economic sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So do we have any comments, remarks? 1, 2, so we start with the lady here and then Kevin over here.
Buenos días, mi nombre.
Good morning. I am Huella from Ecuador. I come from the Yasuni Guarani people. The topic you mentioned about blue protected area, I live in a protected area. As you said, in Paris they had reached an agreement so that they can help keep the Amazon in the region. But what happens? Nothing has been done for the Amazon region. Escazú, they said, in protected area, our land, our territory is the native Indian lands, but they have not held any consultations for protected areas. But our land is inside these areas. Now you're talking about the banks, the financing sector. These financing areas should be owned by the native Indians. We take care of these lands. We have lived in these areas. We live in the home of the Guarani people. We have preserved for the world, for humankind. So I request you as banks, as financing entities, be aware of the situation in countries such as Ecuador. We have non-violation, non-respect of the Amazonian region. So banks should have to understand that our land is not for sale, is not a business. Our territory, our land is life, biodiversity of people, of communities, water, the medicine, traditional medicine that we have. So I want to recommend to each of you, our life, we want to live our lives. We want to have healthy seas and oceans, because this means life, marine life. The importance of fish, our life as well, is something that we need you to understand this point. Why countries, or you request direct funding to governments, to the regional and to each country funding, but they don't take into account the native Indians, that we take care of our lands. So I recommend you that you work with the native Indians, the native people, because you invest resources and you give the resources to governments, and they do not do much for us. So we are very much concerned about this. We want the organization of native Indian peoples work with you so that resources are available and we manage these funds. Do not forget that you only think about money, but the jungle, our home, is the life that we want. We, for the world, we are giving life to humankind, your children. We want them to be alive. We are leaving them this for the future. So I do recommend, and just listen to my words. I come from Ecuador. Thank you.
For that important perspective, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for organizing this and the call to action and all the panelists. This was very good. I'm Kevin Bender from the Nature Conservancy, and I'm very happy to hear the comments of the, considering the debt for nature swaps, or the debt conversions, as I like to call them. So we've done 4 of these, and then Pew has done one recently in the Galapagos. So we're talking about billions of dollars of debt, and there's a huge debt problem. So when you're talking about countries that need to focus on their oceans, they need to have the money for it. So we do need innovative solutions, and I'm not saying that debt conversions are a panacea, but they definitely need to be in this conversation. And we have in TNT, we're broadening our scope for these debt conversions to cover forest, green and freshwater and climate as well. But as of now, all of these, including the one that Pew did, was ocean focused, right? So we do have a system. I appreciate your comment of what works in the Mediterranean can't just be copied, cookie cuttered into the Caribbean, but let's not reinvent the wheel. We've got a system that works, so let's try to piece that together. And I would mention to you two particular that we are co-chairing a working group for COP28 on climate and nature-linked sovereign debt structures. And within that, the big issue that we have with that is credit enhancement. So it would be great if you guys can think about sovereign credit enhancement in your strategies, because governments are facing extremely high levels of debt. The levels of debt, particularly like in Africa, are higher than they were before the HIPC initiative came around. So the levels are high, and interest rates are much higher than any of these ministries of finance are used to, right? So we've got a huge problem here with scarcity of funds, and these countries need a lot of help to get that done, and a lot of that can be done through the credit enhancement. And I'd just like to give a shout out to DFC, who's sitting back here. They've done the vast majority of this work on the credit enhancement side for these structures, and are happy to, we're happy to work with anybody on what we're doing, and they're happy to work. And we do have a technical group that we've put together that we would like to bring some of the larger groups into. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I pass straight on to you, but I think it's great that we have an example where the blue space was ahead of the green space. And so there's some hope that we can move ocean positive blue solutions. And I'm afraid you'll be our last speaker, because then we have to ask Carlos to wrap it up and tell us what we've learned.
Thank you, first of all, Kevin, for setting the stage for this conversation at the very end. I really appreciate what the lady from the community was saying, and that's a huge part of how we evaluate these debt financial swaps. I don't even have the words to say how important community involvement and community stakeholder engagement is. So I just wanted to state that for the record, because that's how we work with the Nature Conservancy and others on evaluating the feasibility of these projects. And I repeat Kevin's call to cooperation on debt and credit enhancements for these, because we are trying to do more and quickly. But there is a host of lessons learned that we are also trying to incorporate, because you can always do things better and learn from past experiences. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it's great to see that collaboration already starting in the room here. And the public development banks will play a key role in all of this. So Carlos, what did you learn? Where are we taking this?
I've learned a lot, Thorsten. Yeah. After listening to our friend from Ecuador, it's really, I don't know, it feels different, because, we've been talking here about money, about funds, about debt, but she's talking about people. So that's what I wanted to, conclude. It's about nature and people. Voy a hablar un poco en español.
I'm going to switch into Spanish. Yesterday we talked with Adonai.
Sí, and DFC, all these. Tenemos un problema.
We have a problem, and I want to reflect on this. PBDs, the MDBs, who are the stakeholders that we need? Private sector. Cynthia talked about how to involve the private sector more, local communities, native Indian groups, ethnic groups. But how money is reaching these lands? Only through the government canals, national government, domestic government. So we have to be more creative when reaching the land with these resources. The role of the cities, for example, 80% of emissions are produced in cities. 80% of power, 80% of consumption, migration from Africa, as we said, and migrations from Latin America. And from the countries go towards the cities looking for health, for benefits and sanitation, and cities will be receiving all this. So all these stakeholders, what is the role that they play in this financial equation? With Adonai yesterday, we said that there is a commitment from the stakeholders, and projects, larger scale projects, to have more resources and more impact, because projects today do not have enough scale to be able to generate the impact that is needed in the land, in the territory. My conclusion, Thorsten, then, is we need to assess the equation. We need the funds, we need the money, We need projects, we need commitment. And I think that we have to look for a common language. The common language of native Indian communities, the common language of the private sector, and to find the photosynthesis of the language. This is a real understand. We don't understand what is the SWOT, blended finance, when we go to the territory. So to look for this common language to generate an impact. 40% of the population globally, 40%, 3 billion people live at least 100 kilometers away from the coastal lines. We have 40% of the population at risk. So finally, Thorsten, we are taking a step at a time. It's too slow. We have to do it faster. We have to do it better. And the call to action is real. Not only speaking here, but when we leave this room, we have to start doing things, not just to talk, but to do things. And this is a commitment and a responsibility that we have here today, each of us. So from now onwards, to save the planet, to work for the oceans, to generate income, to close these poverty gaps, and of course, to have local economies, to be able to prosper and to do conservation, to be neutral in carbon and have a positive biodiversity. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias a todos los participantes y felicitaciones a los bancos públicos de desarrollo por este siguiente paso que han tomado. Gracias.